This episode of the Danger Close podcast is brought to you by Cry Havoc, from New York Times #1 best-selling author Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Reese thriller. Order now.
You know, for that scene, I'm going to get Chris, and there was not a whole lot of preparation I had to do to get myself in that mindset. We saw a buddy of mine laying on the ground, you know, or in the water in this case, you know, and so it's just kind of there. It's kind of there, and it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm acting right now, like I'm getting my buddy. Like, no, I'm getting my buddy, and I got to get him out of here, you know. And I could see the same with the other SEALs. Like, we all kind of had the same look and feel, and it was really cool.
Today's show, we're talking about the very first episode, the Engram. Yeah, and I am joined by showrunner David DiGilio and, Jared Shaw, the man who is responsible for all of this, because back in 2017, before the book had even hit shelves, he handed a copy to Chris Pratt, and that kicked off all of this. Former Navy SEAL, actor on the show, technical advisor on the show, producer on the show, and the three of us right here together. I am so fired up. Thank you guys for doing this. We've had such a great time together over the past few years. I mean, I can't even imagine doing this with anybody else. I mean, it would have been impossible without Jared giving it to Chris. And then of all the people that they could interview and could end up doing this show, David, you do this show, and I mean, from day one, from our first phone call in December of 2019, I mean, it was off to the races. And I don't think there's been a day since then that we haven't talked or texted. And it's been such a joy and such a pleasure to work with you through this. I mean, I can't sing both of your guys' praises enough. And I'm so excited about what we created together. So thank you guys for making this happen.
Thank you, Jack. It's been incredible, man. Thank you for welcoming me into the Brotherhood. You too, Jared. It's been, I think, a remarkable journey, both creatively, but just in terms of the bonds that were built making this show. It's been remarkable, I think, to see everybody, you know, civilian, military veteran, combat veteran alike, stepping up because they're so passionate about this world, about this character that you created. So thank you. You know, I've said it to you before, but I want to say it here. Thank you. You truly are the godfather of this project. You texted me long ago when we were working on the pilot, "Long live the Brotherhood," and explained what that meant. And we lived that as our ethos making this show.
Man, it has been wild. And, man, you know, we should kick this off with, you know, how this came to be, how the three of us got linked up, because eventually we added Max Adams, former Army Ranger, writer, who was there every day on set. We added Ray Mendoza of War Office Productions, SEAL buddy of ours, who does technical advising in Hollywood, also there every day to make sure we remained grounded in reality. But before we got to that, actually, before David and I linked up in December of 2019 to start hashing this whole thing out, Jared gave the book to Chris. And man, I'd always wanted to write since I was a little kid. Got this book going as I was leaving the military, got it to Simon & Schuster. They loved it, got a publishing deal. And before it even came out, so in November of 2017, we reconnect and you let me know that, hey, you'd like to give a copy of this book to a friend of yours. And I asked you who that was, and you said Chris Pratt, which is crazy because as I'm writing this thing, I'm thinking of Chris Pratt playing the role. Exact guy right there. And I'm thinking of Antoine Fuqua directing. So you told me that. I mean, that just blew me away. I mean, how insane is that for me to sit down in the days before Jurassic World, the days before Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers, when he is Andy Dwyer on Parks and Rec, and he has this very small role in Zero Dark 30 as a SEAL. And I saw that transformation and I said, Chris Pratt is the guy to bring James Reese to life. Of course, I have no idea that you know him. I have no connections at this point in publishing or in Hollywood. I'm just sitting down, picking my director, picking my actor, picking my publisher, and that's about all the thought that I gave that. And then everything else went into the story. It never occurred to me that Chris Pratt might not play this role, or that Antoine Fuqua might not direct it, or that Simon & Schuster and Emily Bessler might not be my editor and publisher. And that's what's happened. So how did that, from your perspective, when you found out about the book and our friend David Bowles reconnected us about 5 years after we'd last met in the SEAL teams, what was that experience like for you from your perspective?
Yeah, well, you just briefly touched on it about when you and I met in the SEAL teams 5-6 years earlier, which was 2012, 2013 timeframe when I was getting ready to transition out of the military. And it in that time frame, transitioning out of the SEAL teams, that's a big deal. It's a whole new world out there, and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, what your next step is, kind of what that looks like when your whole adult life, you've lived this life. I lived this life as a SEAL. You lived a life as a SEAL. So I'm getting ready to get out, 30-year-old guy that doesn't have a very solid plan. And you and my paths had crossed a little bit. I worked under you as a BUDS instructor, but you were way higher up. So we never had a whole lot of time to sit and talk and really get to know each other, and I was about a month or two away from getting out of the military, and there I'm walking down, heading to the next, evolution or whatever I was instructing at that point. And you saw me and you said, "Hey, you're Shaw." "Yes, sir." Usually when somebody addressed me like that, I'm like, "Oh, this is not good." And you're like,
well, you have some experience on that stuff from that side of the house. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast, though. Totally another deal.
We don't have time for that right now.
No,
yeah,
we sure don't.
Yeah. So, you said, "Man, I hear you're transitioning out. You're getting out." I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, do you have a plan? Do you know what you want to do?" And I had a general idea. I wanted to go back to Texas and teach weapon safety and teach people, kind of the fundamentals of weapons handling and shooting and all that. And you said, "Well, you know what? Come here, come in my office, let's down. I want to talk to you about it." So you took time out of your day to sit down, talk to me, mentor me, go over options with me, that then led to you connecting me with friends of yours on the outside world that were in Texas, right next to where I was from. And you made all those connections, for me when we didn't hardly know each other, and getting out, I didn't have anybody that really set me down and mentored me like that and took time to kind of take me under their wing and say, "Hey, let's look at this. Let's look at this," and so ended up getting out, transition, going back to Texas, that whole deal. And that's when 4 or 5 years later, David Bowles reaches out to me. And just like you touched on, he said, "Hey, do you remember this fella here, Jack?" And I had to think about it a bit. I'm like, "Oh, you know what? I do remember him." And he said, "Well, he read a book. I think you need to read it." And it's kind of that whole deal of like, a military
another
guy,
SEAL wrote a book.
Yeah, another SEAL.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I said, and I told David, or Debo, as we call him, I said, "Debo, that man went out of his way for me when he had no reason to do it. No skin in the game, nothing. And he took care of me. Absolutely. Send it my way, And then it was at that point, I'm like, "Yeah, I'll read it. Yeah, sure." And I read it. And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Like we are on to something here." And that's when I got a hold of you. I'm like, "Hey, do you mind if I let my buddy read it?" And
I don't mind. You being great friends with Chris was certainly convenient, especially for me, since I envisioned him playing this part. But interestingly enough, in the SEAL teams, your reputation is your currency in life as well. And if you see to your character, then your reputation take care of itself. So I knew you by reputation, which means I knew your character. And, you always want to help good guys, whether they're staying in the military or getting out. And, man, you got out and crushed it. And then here we are today, and you gave it to Chris, and he loved it. He read it at the end of December 2017, and you have a great picture of him reading it for the first time. That's I think you took surreptitiously. I might post it anyway one of these days. But you guys are going to a premiere somewhere overseas, and you snap this picture and send it to me. And then he called the next week wanting to option it. And then at the same time, my friend who wrote No Easy Day, Mark Owen, he gave the book to Antoine. And Antoine read it, and they both wanted it. So now I have my exact actor and my exact director that I wanted, both wanting to do this. And even after that happened, and David, you probably know this better than anybody, books get optioned all the time. And a lot of times they just go on the shelf. And my agent and publisher have seen this hundreds of times. And they're kind of like, thousands. Oh, okay. Kind of like, that's nice. Never once did I question that we would be here right now. So Chris options it, and eventually we get to this stage where, hey, it's time to pick a showrunner for this thing. And how did they find you, Dave? How did they reach out to you in the world of showrunners? And for those who don't know what a showrunner is, I think a best way to describe it, and please correct me, is in a feature film, you have the director that's kind of the strategic level guy that's like juggling everything and making everything happen. In a series, you have multiple directors. So you have a showrunner who now has to deal with multiple directors, writers' rooms, like all these things that are happening, essentially the singular point of contact for everything, which is a lot of weight. And actually, Jared and I talked about this the other day, about how many times we would be discussing something and it would be like, oh man, I can't believe we have to change this, or somebody wants to change this or whatever. And like right away, Jared and I are like, and you were so calm, cool, and collected at every stage with such a positive attitude that I would immediately forget what had made me angry for 2 seconds. And I'd be like, look at this guy. He has the weight of the world on his shoulders of this crazy production. And he's like, just thinking about it, but smile on the face, but serious at the same time. And like comes up with something so logical and so rooted in the foundation of both the novel and in what we'd created for the series. Like, incredible. Like, I don't know where you got that disposition, if you've always had it or you've learned it over time in other productions, but how did they find you?
So I came to this in what's called an open writing assignment, an OWA. So I was coming off my last show. I was very curious to jump right back into the showrunner chair. And it was a little different. On the last show, I was running a show for another writer. And in this show, I knew I was going to show run and be the head writer. Collaborating with you, Jack, every step of the way. So first off, I read the book and I get fired up by everything on the page. For me, it's the look inside, and we've talked about this, the warrior class. That's never like the deep dive that you do, because you haven't just lived it, you've studied it. You're a student of history. And that's something that really separates you, I think, from a lot of other authors. And then the authenticity on the page, and this commitment to like bring that authenticity to the screen in a way that we've never seen before. Those two things really jumped out off the page, and I was pumped. But then, you guys just mentioned this, and it's interesting because you lived in this world where reputation is currency. And I'm somebody who comes from a background of selflessness and really teamwork. I was an athlete my whole life. And the notion of team is everything. And I think for me, the thing that got me really fired up were those initial conversations. Talking with Chris, he comes out of that athletic background as well. Antoine, same thing. And then you, Jared, Ray, like the notion, even the fact that they call them the SEAL teams, right? Like that really resonates with a guy who loves the creative endeavor, but is often frustrated by the selfish culture. So I was like, oh, here we go. We can do something incredible. We can actually collaborate and build something that is like utterly unique and put that on screen. And I think that was, ultimately what got me the job is like, one, I had a take on the book that I think is a lot of fun in terms of like leaning into the psychological thriller element of the character. You had, something going on in Reese's mind. Well, what if we don't know what it is right away? And we kind of lean into that unreliable narrator for a little bit.
Yeah.
But then I think the other thing is just the notion of really valuing collaboration. I bring that into every project, and you got to, it's a crazy business, and the showrunner job is 100-hour weeks for many, many months.
Yeah. Years. And, years. It's been years since that initial conversation. And we've talked every day. Were you nervous the first time that we talked? Were you like, oh, geez, another author, he's going to stick to the story. It can't change. You're ruining my vision. Were you thinking that during that first call, like the first few seconds?
I can't remember if I told you this, but honestly, I've never had that call.
Yeah.
That call. It was amazing. So I was like, oh man, I don't know what is going to happen here. I wasn't sure. And then to meet you over the phone and realize that you're so much like me in terms of how we view creativity and collaboration. And immediately I realized, oh, this is going to be incredible.
Oh, so cool.
This is going to be amazing, because we're going to be able to adapt with the author overseeing us every step of the way in a true collaboration. And I can't remember what interview it was, but they were talking about the key to adaptation. And I was like, it's honor and surprise. Those two things. You have to honor what makes the source material so unique, and then figure out a way to surprise the audience when they see it adapted to the screen.
Yeah, because now you're telling a story visually, totally different medium. So things are going to change. You got to walk in with that. And when you brought the psychological element, I was like, yes, that's it. That's it. That's what breaks this apart visually from everything else. And then I think you talked to Antoine and you're like, this is Antoine Fuqua meets Alfred Hitchcock. And it sure is. Some of those camera angles and those first, and those things, especially in the first episode. That's it. If you watch it with that, if people listen to this and then go back and watch that first episode, thinking about Antoine meeting Hitchcock, and then they watch it with that lens, it's a different deal. And then you're like, oh yes, that's it. Cause it is so different and it does break it out.
He puts you in Reese's head.
Yeah.
Right. He calls it visual literacy. We can put it on the page, but then that director has to translate it into this rectangle.
Yeah.
And everything in that rectangle, the composition, the light, everything is a choice that Antoine is making. And then we have to pass that knowledge on to each director who comes after him.
Yeah.
And oh man, just that shot of Reese when he's talking to Pillar and Howard at Warcom, and we just sit on the back of his head with that slow push. It's so unsettling.
Yeah.
Right? It's just so unsettling. And that notion of just kind of suspense.
Yeah.
Right? It's not all action with Antoine. Suspense. What is coming around the corner? You have that feeling down in the tunnels, and then he carries it throughout the entire first episode. And we try to then carry it throughout the season.
Oh yeah. And Jared, you in those tunnels, man, I have a couple of cool pictures just on my iPhone from being in those tunnels, and you're silhouetted and your weapon is right there. And the lights are outside and you're going in to going out to come back in and then do another take. And I have some really cool photos that I'm going to share at some point, because they're just awesome. But, people have just probably watched this episode and they know that you are Boozer, and, the way you play this character is so awesome. Yelling at Chris in those tunnels, yelling at Reese as he's down, knocked out, telling him to get back in the fight. So powerful. Before I get to that, creating this episode, it was a quick turnaround, and I only know that because you told me that. Yeah. And from getting that go ahead to, hey, we need a pilot because we need to walk this thing around because of scheduling and everything else, and we need to sell this thing with a showrunner, a star, a director, and a pilot episode. So for those that think screenwriting, you just kind of write some dialogue and then describe something and say, this guy takes this action. Wow. It is an incredible art form. And I was so fortunate that you mentored me along and taught me as we were going. I learned so much over these last couple of years, but in particular, that first episode, because it's the first time I'm really seeing a script and you're creating it out of nothing. And that was fascinating. I learned so much, but you took that script. So we got that thing, you wrote it. I'm learning learning, giving a little advice here and there. And then you take that with Chris and Antoine and you guys walk it around, gets into some bidding war, ends up Amazon Prime Video. And then we look at these, and which is a perfect home for it. And then next steps. Okay, what happens next? Oh, a writer's room. Let's get this thing together. Okay, 8 episodes.
Wait, hold on. There was a small thing that happened in between.
COVID?
The world shut down.
There is that.
I mean, people don't know this, but like we sold this in a bidding war the week before the world shut down.
Amazing.
And so this was one of the first major shows built entirely in a Zoom room where the writers were all in these little boxes. There's still writers on this show who I have not met in person.
Crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
The premiere was the first time I'd met multiple writers from this show. And so, man, what a fascinating time to be building a show, 2020. Right. Utter madness, right?
Right.
And I think in a great way, it kind of fueled the work, right? Because I want to make sure people know we didn't start from nothing. I think you said start from no.
Well,
no.
We had a book that now has this guy on the cover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is my copy with all my.
Nice. That's an original. That's one's the Trident on it still. Yeah, that's awesome.
But no, man, it was awesome that sometimes chaos just fuels you creatively, and you have this incredible character who's dealing with so much chaos, right? And then that sets him down his path. And wow, every day, I think we were texting and talking about the discoveries that were made. Like, hey, you Boozer, that death, that's the midpoint of the episode. Reese has come back. He thinks he's just starting to click in to life back home, and then boom,
bam.
Right?
Yeah.
And we just built that kind of structure out for episode 1, where we knew there would be 3 moments of loss for this character, so that each time he thinks he's starting to grasp what's going on, we just turn the dial a little more and tighten the screws a little more.
Yeah.
You get to the end, and man, we were over in Europe and for the European premiere, and a great actor walked up to Antoine and was like, I just got to tell you, the last 15 minutes of that pilot, like, I don't care if it's film or TV, can we curse on this?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Holy shit. Like, those last 15 minutes are off the hook.
Yeah.
And what he does with the camera and what our stunt team did, what everybody, built into those last 15 minutes.
It's crazy. But not even those last 15 minutes, those first 15 minutes. Because I remember when how we start this thing out, and how when you texted me, you're like, hey, what do you think about Syria? And, at the time I was like, yeah, we can change it to Syria and some tunnels.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, genius. I mean, we're not in Afghanistan anymore. So already we would have dated it.
I think you called that, though. I think we had a conversation. I feel like you were like, yeah, we could be out by then.
Well, I think I was like, something had just happened. I think it was one of the Delta Force raids in Syria, and it was in the news. That kind of fueled as well. And we're like, oh, tunnels, different. And also we're thinking ahead to those other episodes, like, okay, we're going to have different action battle type sequences. How do we differentiate each one of these? And then tunnels. Ooh, and then why don't we just flood these tunnels? Like, have it come up to be, and then you're starting this creative process, which was so cool. And looking back now, I mean, thank goodness it wasn't a mountain in Afghanistan, because we'd already have dated ourselves. And that was, that was incredible foresight on your part. But
then Jared and Ray and Garrett, I mean, what you guys did with that opening.
Yeah. So how do we get there? How do we get from this page, this pilot sold to Amazon, COVID hits, writer's room together. We have these scripts now. Now Jared's off other projects and focusing more on this as Chris is getting more prepared for this. We have a calendar date ready to go. Like, okay, March of 2021, we're going to start filming this thing. Jared's now looking through all the scripts going, no. And it is so great to have somebody looking at it red selling. And because you and I can be sitting here and thinking our plan is terrific. And then somebody comes in from the outside for like a half a second and is like, no, that doesn't make any sense right there.
That won't happen.
Son of a God, how did we not see that? That's why having people come in the military and red sell your plan from the outside is such an important part of the planning process.
Massive.
But Jared, when you saw that, so you get this script at some point, obviously prior to March of 2021, but you start looking at these things and making such a huge contribution to the script even before we get on set. And then once we get on set, I mean, what you do and what Ray does and Max does in collaboration with David, and like, it's an incredible team. But when you see these scripts, like, what are you thinking, and and do you have the part of Boozer yet, or you're just like looking at these scripts really essentially as my buddy and Chris's buddy? Like, how are you? What does this look like for you?
Yeah, exactly. I knew at some point I was going to try to audition for something. I wasn't sure, but I knew there was something I wanted to go after, and just that audition. If I was not the right person for the job, then project came first, without question. And so to answer your question, I started really seeing the scripts in January of that year when I was with Chris in Australia. So Chris and I are locked in a hotel room that we cannot leave.
Like 3 weeks, right?
2 weeks of quarantine. Yeah. Fly there. He has 2 weeks of actual work there, but we have to front load it with 2 weeks of quarantine because we're not allowed to, and literally you can't walk out your door. They have guards on each floor. You're in there for 2 weeks. And it really was a blessing in disguise, because then Chris, who has a crazy schedule, as we all know, was pinned down. He couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, he couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really when all of us were able to start collaborating. You guys had done so much heavy lifting already, and then Chris and I were secluded, not able to go anywhere, started looking at it. And that's when, Jack, I was able to kind of start digging in and bringing a fresh set of eyes to it on the tactical side, the storyline side. I mean, Dave, I trust you, I mean, you've shown that from day one. I trust your eye, your knowledge, every bit of that, so I was really coming in from kind of a tactical side and a little bit of the actorly brain, like, okay, trying to mesh those two worlds. And so, I was able to bring in some changes on that part. And it was really just an opportunity. Dave, that's the first time you and I ever spoke of.
I know, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It really was. And so that was the moment that was able to jump in it and start making those little changes. And then we came back in early February, and then we hit the ground running in March. It was game on.
Man.
Yeah. And specifically, Jack, to that opening, that was like really one of the most interesting evolutions. I mean, I have just off camera here, like the little hand-drawn diagram of the tunnels that I did with you. I was like, okay, I think it's like this. And we just had, we had like a little fork in a tunnel, and like, then that was it. Right. And then I remember the day we all met up, we were out in a parking lot down in South Bay of Los Angeles, and stunts or production design had taped out this outline of the tunnels, and Antoine's walking through that with you guys, Ray Mendoza, Garrett Golden, and they start talking the tactics side of it, right, in the real world space. And marrying that with this notion that Antoine had, that it's like each section of the tunnel is a chapter in this little mini novel, and each one pulls you deeper into the sense of unease. And man, I think it was from that the heavy machine gunner behind the grate came into play, right? And we figured out exactly where that tripwire was going to be, how that was going to play, how Rex the dog was going to play in this. All of that, man, it was so cool to kind of let you guys work. And then, by the way, another evolution happened once we built the set at Paramount in the tanks. And then I would just sit down with Jared and Ray with the script, and we would just take all the new discoveries and just load it up into the script, beat by beat by beat. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of teamwork on this show, because, you know, we had made a huge premium, right, on authenticity, just building the scripts. Was checking everything with you, Jack, checking everything with Max Adams constantly, right? But even with that, when you get into the real world environment, there are discoveries that are made.
Oh, yeah.
And even beyond that, and probably something people don't know, Jared was with me in every visual effects review with me and Antoine, making sure that like muzzle flashes looked real, bullet hits looked real, blood hits, all those things. So literally from conception to completion, making sure that we had the eyes of people who know on every frame.
All right, this is Jack Carr, and I want to talk a little bit today about Only the Dead. If you've read the previous novels and this one, you'll know that each of my books has a theme. And the theme of Only the Dead is truth and consequences. And I have the Sig Rattler featured in this book because I had some friends out there at the time who were using this setup for real. So I incorporated it into the narrative. And I write, the AR was a Sig Rattler in 300 blackout, with an aim-point micro red dot sight and folding front and rear iron sights. Reese extended the brace as far back as it would go, gave the weapon a press check, and ensured the red dot was illuminated. It was ready to rock. He turned his eyes to the bed. Not yet. He set the Sig down and then stripped off the sheets and blankets, spreading them on the floor. He then went to the bathroom and pulled a towel from the rack, pushing it up against the base of the door to block out what little light escaped from the main room. He then removed his pistol, holster, belt, wallet, and cash from his pockets and arranged them next to the Rattler. He ran his finger over the name on the envelope. It was in blue ink, in his father's distinctive script. It looked like Tom Reese could have written it yesterday. That was the thing about letters, about signatures. They connect us to the past. Reese was not yet ready to read it. He gave it one last look before placing it next to the high power and lying down in the blankets. Pulling the comforter over himself, Reese was asleep in seconds. So I had some friends out there doing the job for real who were using the Rattler right here in this configuration, pretty much, with the aim point right there, with the backup irons, and there's had suppressors though. I need to get a suppressor for this bad boy right here. But pretty compact and 300 blackout, fits nicely into satchels. Indiana Jones carries one, or backpack. So pretty slick little setup right here that also feels really good as well. So there it is, Sig Rattler. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, situation, terrain dictate. Like you get out there, like we have a plan in the military, and you know we're out there, and then all of a sudden things are a little different now. Enemy gets a vote, you hit an ID on the way in, a car breaks down, a helicopter has a mechanical issue. You know, all those sorts of things. Same thing with a script. It looks so great right here, and then we get out there, and you're on the terrain. You're like, ooh, that mountain, that hill, that doesn't quite fit with the story. Why wouldn't they just like walk over here and shoot him or whatever it is? And then you have to adapt just like you do in the military. And then as you get further along, you have these actors who bring different things to the roles that you couldn't anticipate with just on the page here. And they bring something. And then now that affects episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So that part is fascinating to me. But Jared, when did you get the role? When did you know you had Boozer? It was pretty, I mean, it wasn't that far from when we actually started.
Early on, it was still, I auditioned when we were in Australia.
Okay.
So which a funny thing that not very many people know is Chris will be good with me telling this. Chris did my hair for the audition.
Nice.
Because I wear a hat all the time, and if I don't have a hat on, I have no idea what to do with my hair. I mean,
that's fantastic.
I'm a country boy from South Texas. You know what I mean? So I did something with it, and I walk out. I'm like, "What do you think?" And he kind of gives me the Chris nice look of like, let me see. Come here. And he gets hair gel and does this whole thing. I'm like, hilarious. All right, yeah. And so then he read opposite of me for the audition.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we did it, and we ended up kind of ad-libbing some stuff and just having fun with it,
Oh, man.
So sent it in still when we were in Australia, and like I said, I prefaced it with, I just want to, if I'm the right person for the job, great. If not, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Like, we got to do what's best for this project, so thankfully it worked out. And to answer your question, I believe, Dave, I was still there in Australia, and we were having one of the Zooms, and we had department heads, 20, 30 people on this Zoom. And I remember Dave coming on, and we were talking a little bit about the casting, and Dave said, hey, unless anybody objects to this, and like I said, 20, 30 people in the Zoom call, I think we're all good with Jared playing Boozer. He's got the part, and I remember that. And I'm like, yeah, like, that was one of those cool moments to hear the showrunner announce it, in front of everybody. That's
cool.
Well, I take that back. He said, does anybody have objections to that? And Ray raises his hand. Ray, come on, buddy. Come on, Ray.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
That was the beginning of your many hyphens on the show, right? Like, this man has more hyphens on this show than anybody. It's truly remarkable, from, development executive, producer, actor, casting director. That was something that happened when you guys were down in Australia. You called and with the idea about Alpha Platoon. I think that's worth pointing out. How many actual former SEALs and special operators are in Alpha Platoon?
Yep. That is a serious group of people right there. And I remember Jared texting me from Australia saying, why don't we just use SEALs? And I'm like, that's a genius idea. Why don't we just do that?
Yeah. But that, Dave, speaks volumes about you and your leadership, from the beginning. And I think everybody listening to this podcast, I hope they understand that, Dave, like, how you went to the mats to ensure that authenticity from, the very beginning of this to the very end. I wouldn't have been in those sessions with you in post had you not set that up and pushed for that, and for me, it was lessons, learning, and it was great. And, under you and your mentorship, but ultimately, like, you pushed for that every single time. And Jack and I, the community that we come from, and that's such a big deal, and so there's never lost on us. And I personally want to thank you for that, for the effort that you always put into to ensure that we nailed that authenticity.
Oh, thank you. And that comes from you guys and your role on this show. I like to say, I know what I know, but I really know what I don't know. And that's important as a storyteller. And I noticed it with Antoine too. Like, man, he has that same thing. He's so dialed in on all that stuff that a truly great director needs in terms of character, psychology, visual literacy, composition, all those things. And then he's the same way, right? When it comes to tactics, when it comes to a question of wardrobe for one of the SEAL characters, he immediately looks to Garrett or one of you guys and says, those are the guys who are going to tell you.
Yeah.
And that is really essential. And I think, this is something that was, foundational. It was in our pitch when we took it out. Chris introduced it with this notion that just like Jack, you brought this unparalleled authenticity to the page, we could do that on screen. And as Chris calls it, it's a love letter to the special operations community because you take the time.
Yeah.
Right. And we live in an era of authenticity. Yeah. It is an era of authenticity. It is awesome to see what's happening with TV, incredible shows out there, but there's not that many military shows, right? Outside of our buddies over at SEAL Team, there's not a lot going on, right? So this was a big way and a huge platform to say to people, like, the authenticity component for the military is one of the best ways to honor their service, because it shows that people care and value. And this, I also got to give a huge hat tip to Amazon and MRC, because it's expensive, right, to get it right. We've seen this. We've done stuff, that we shot, and then in visual effects, we fixed it because we needed to get it right.
Yeah.
And so, we've said this before, we'll get busted. There will be some Hollywood hot sauce in there, as Chris says.
Yeah.
It will happen, but it's not for lack of trying.
Exactly.
To make it as authentic as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. I talk about, hey, if you wanted to, you have to see we could have a black screen for the first 30 minutes of this show and maybe just hear some dialogue. But if you want to see what the actors are doing, there's going to be some light in there. There's things like that, there's like, you gotta, there's some things just like that. But man, and in those tunnels, so Jared, I mean, you guys, when I showed up on set, it was like a SEAL reunion. And, we got Kenny Sheard there. We got Ryan Sangster there. We got this whole crew of SEALs. Garrett's there. And we're like, dude, what's up? What's happening? The COVID police are losing their minds because we're like hugging it out, and all that stuff.
That was a danger zone.
Exactly. And then you guys, man, it was so cool to be there and so cool to see how close to a military operation this was, in that you have like Antoine, he's like the commanding officer, setting that tone strategically. You have number one on the call sheet, Chris, who's setting that tone tactically for the production. You have craft food services. You got to feed the troops. You have the armorer right there, just like in a SEAL platoon, checking the weapons in and out, inventorying them. You have your explosives guy, because in this first episode, we have a big explosion in tunnels and these stuntmen getting pulled on these wires that really do smash them into the walls. I could not believe what these guys had to endure for that. Like, people think, oh, it's all green screens and, it's pads everywhere. These guys get crushed. It's incredible. So we have that. You have a mobility guy getting the vehicles in the right spots, just like we would in a SEAL platoon. You have a mobility guy, make sure the vehicles are all gassed up, they're ready to rock. You have the routes to and from the target, all those things. So there's so many different positions that are so similar to a military organization and a military operation. So that really stood out. And then you are geared up, Jared, just like you would be in real life, and off you guys go into the target. And I'm watching it on the screen, almost like I'm back in the tactical operations center, watching it, allocating assets. And it's like you're watching it just like we would if I was watching something in Iraq, where I have multiple elements out there kind of at the end of my time in uniform, and allocating assets to those different units that are out there with different missions on any particular night. But to see you guys go in there and crush it was just incredible. What was it like to be there in the tunnels? You're working with your best friend, Chris. He's like, in this position where he's not shot, but he's like been blown out, smashed into the wall. You're trying to wake him up. You don't know his condition, telling him to get back in the fight. And that's so powerful. And we go back to that time and time again in other episodes, showing that because it is so powerful. What was that like to gear up and go in and be with SEALs? Like, we could have done an actual operation. That group that we had there, like, we could have actually been like, oh, there's something happening a few blocks down. Let's go take care of this thing. And you guys went in and crushed it. What was it like to be in those tunnels with SEALs on your right and left, with your best buddy there, and making this thing happen?
Yeah. It's kind of like when we're really overseas and we're inserting, where we're coming in, via Hilo or Humvee, however we did it, we always kind of joked, laughed, did whatever until we were getting ready to step foot on the target, and that was the same thing in these tunnels. You have all these combat seasoned dudes that had been there, done it. Some we'd actually worked together overseas, had those experiences. We're laughing and we're joking until you call action. And then it's like, boom, you lock it on and you go, and the only difference is you're not really getting shot back at, and so in a way it's almost therapeutic, to go through that and live those experiences in front of the camera. You have that camaraderie, you have it all, all the feels are there, all the instincts are there, you're still clearing a corner and you still feel that like, oh dude, like I'm about to take this corner, but it's so there's not acting involved with that. It's just it's just relying on your training and what we know, and then when we go to the part with Chris, when when we just got blown up, and I was up in the tunnel, boom, come down. And, for that scene, I'm going to get Chris, and there was not a whole lot of preparation I had to do to get myself in that mindset. I simply saw a buddy of mine laying on the ground, or in the water in this case, and so it's just kind of there. It's kind of there. And it's in a way, I hate using the word easy, but it's available to tap into, you know, to where it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm acting right now, like I'm getting my buddy. Like, no, I'm getting my buddy and I got to get him out of here, you know. And I could see the same with the other SEALs, you know, that were Justin Garza and AJ, who were in there with us, you know, in the tunnels at that time after the explosion. I could see it with them, like we all kind of had the same look and feel, and it was really cool. And then you look at Chris, and what a stud, what he brings to the table acting wise, not just in that scene, but all the scenes is unreal, you know, for him to step in that, for the world to see kind of the range of what he's going to be, you know, to show his range on this project is really cool, which is amazing that you saw it years ago when you wanted him to be the lead. You wanted him to be James Reese, you know, but to see that and then act alongside him, you know, be opposite him, you know, bar scene as well, just to have those moments, man. It's like, this is powerful stuff. I can't speak enough good about how well he did becoming that.
Yeah, you know? No, he really embodied it throughout the whole season, which was so magical. It has heart. You know, that's that one intangible that we look at when I look at something art, whether it's a book or a television series or a film or a painting or whatever it might be. It's this intangible thing that's called heart. Introducing the BCM Stock Mod 3 and Marksman Risers. Built from years of real-world experience, the BCM Mod 3 stock is the next evolution in M4 accessories. Minimalist, snag-free, and just 6.4 ounces with double-walled H-beam construction for unmatched durability. Paired with the Mark III Marksman Risers in 0.5 and 0.8 inches. The Mod 3 offers total customization with 6 mounting positions and forward or reverse orientation. It delivers a consistent cheek weld for passive night vision or CQB. For high-ready weapons manipulation, it features a removable diamond textured butt pad, non-slip grip panels, and a quick adjust design with integrated sling attachment points. Plus, its patented internal latch system and ergonomic lever ensure rugged performance with tool-free installation. Proudly made in the USA, the BCM Mod 3 stock, built to outlast and outperform. Get yours now at BravoCompanyUSA.com. And that's the magic of it. But people might not be too surprised to learn that the military was not overly enthused about helping us with this project. We had the God bless the Marine Corps, who wanted to jump in on it at the beginning. We were close, and then the big Navy said, "Hey, wait a sec, our men's department over here in the Marine Corps want to help out on this project, and these guys want to blow up an admiral in his office." I don't think so, never. So but I like that better. And, I think about the Kane Mutiny, Humphrey Bogart back in the day, off the Herman Wouk novel, of course, and how the military came in and they made all these different stipulations of what you could and you could not do to show the military in a good light. Because obviously the Kane Mutiny, brilliant book, brilliant film. They do not show Navy leadership in the greatest light. So they were not enthused to help on this, but I love it because it plays in to themes in the novels, to our personal experience, being on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan at the tactical level, and having strategic level decision makers really not understand the nature of the conflict in which we're engaged. So it really played in. So as soon as I heard that the military did not want to help with this, I was like, good. It's back. It's on us. Let's do this. Get the team together and let's crush it. Maybe season 2. Maybe season 2. They might want to help out a little bit. Give us an aircraft carrier, an Osprey, or something cool like that to play with. We'll see. I
like that idea.
Yeah, we'll see if they come to their senses. So people shouldn't be surprised to hear that. So all this we had to do on our own. So when people see that the helicopters and the miniguns going and all that stuff, the military did not help with that.
They did not. Production design, transport department, and the vehicles that they were able to get in. Visual effects, all those things, right? Come into play. Incredible. Wardrobe department, what those guys did, unreal.
Everybody crushed it at every single level. Man, I cannot be more thrilled. And what people also don't know is probably that, there are we filmed a lot. And now it's, this first episode is it a little over an hour? I forget exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's like, I think it clocks in at like 65 minutes with credits.
Remember that first one I saw, so the director's cut was almost 2 hours.
It was so long.
Yeah. And I remember watching it for the first time, and it's my first time, in this space and seeing it. I'm like, nothing can be cut. This is amazing.
Nothing.
This is awesome. We cannot lose
perfect.
1 second of this.
Yes.
Antoine is a genius, and we cannot mess with his creation. This is perfect. And then they're like, no, you got to make this thing an hour. I went, nope, sorry, nope.
I think they said 55 minutes.
Yeah,
I think
we
that
got
was
closer. Negotiation.
And we ended up we found a way to split the difference and land that plane. But really, it's exactly what you brought up, which is you got to protect the director's vision. It's a big part of the showrunner's job. It's your vision as well, but like when again, visual literacy. That is the director's medium.
Yeah.
And so we had to really shape it down while protecting Antoine's vision. And he's with us every step of the way as we do that, to be clear. Like it's down to the frame with him. And this notion of like every frame tells a story. And that is what's so incredible about working with a director like that, or David Fincher, those guys who just are beautiful visual storytellers.
Yeah.
It's remarkable, but it's a process, right? We write it, build it, the kind of foundation, the blueprint. And that's the movie that we wrote. And then there's the movie that you shot. And then there's the movie that you edit.
Interesting. Yeah, I heard you say that before.
It evolves. You do it 3 times, right? In animation, they do it a lot more than that. But in live action, that's the way it works.
Interesting.
And man, this pilot, I think, we spoke about Chris, on the tactical side, on the leadership side, but the performance, man.
Oh, incredible. And I think that first scene in the tunnels was almost twice as long. I think. I'd love to watch that director's cut again, and then immediately after watch ours. And I think I'd be like, oh, now I get it. Like now I see. Now I see. Because then we move and you see Chris, and he's in this interrogation room, which really came from a personal experience.
And right out of the book, right? I mean, that's one that we took. I was like, oh, I love this scene, Jack. We just want to go up, and just lifted it, put it right in.
That comes from a real place. Those feelings come from a real place. Being across the desk from NCIS guys. NCIS people might not want to watch this series. Well, watch it anyway. That came from a real place. And you see Chris in there, and the confusion, and the Hitchcock type of camera movements on his face, and the eye movements, and it is just fantastic. Even the trailer captures it. It's so powerful, so amazing. And then we have this beautiful scene with Jared and Chris sitting at the bar. Of course, after Chris is told no alcohol, which I love. Just things like that I just love. And then next scene, it's like pouring the Hooten Young, which you have, I know, right in your office there, Dave. Yep, there it is. Started Delta Force guys, right there, veterans, started that company, and then there they are, and they're having this conversation, and that scene was maybe 3 times as long than it is in that final cut that people are watching now. And each one of those conversations, or as it flows between Jared and Chris, Boozer and Reese right there talking together, every single one of those words is like what we would really say in real life to one another. And it's so cute, cool, and so pure. And Jared, you are so awesome in that scene. I love it.
So awesome.
And maybe there's a director's cut someday where people can go the deleted scenes or something and see that whole conversation between you guys, because it's fantastic. And then it whittles down to the essential elements that people are seeing in this cut today that's on Amazon Prime. And then the Katie introduction. But that scene with you guys at the bar, what was it like to sit down with Chris and do that? And was it every single thing that you guys talked about in that longer version, director's cut, was that all on the written page, or did you guys ad lib at all?
No, we definitely ad libbed, and that's once again where I was impressed with Chris and being able to tap in that. I mean, we all know he's a great actor, but that's a world, Jack, that we know very well. Sitting at a bar,
Drinking at a bar,
but not just drinking at a bar, but toasting our buddies that we lost, and whether we were there with them or, we get that phone call when we find out. And so we know that world. I get goosebumps just thinking about it right now, and so sitting there with Chris, Chris has been with me when I've gotten that call before, in real world gotten that call, and so to sit there next to him, Chris is such a great, compassionate dude, and bringing James Reese to life and sitting in that moment. That was a moment that him and I sitting there, the first take we did, Dave, I don't know if you remember, but I look over and he's just got tears streaming down his face. Yeah. and
people might not know that was the first day of filming on the Terminal List.
Sure was.
The very first day.
Yep.
We threw Jared and Chris and Constance right into the fire.
Yeah.
With a massively important moment.
Yeah. That was kind of a sink or swim moment on that one for me, jumping in there. But that was one that, unfortunately, like I said, I kind of had experience with. So, people talk about as actors, you take those those life experiences, and you bring them with you, and you're able to use those. And it's true, but that scene, Jack, we knew we had to nail that, what I mean? Yeah. And we knew that you can't fake that, and so I had to go to my places that I had to go to, and he went to the places that he went to. And man, I think there's something special there. There's a chemistry there, there's that was a powerful moment. Watching it back, when we're in the premiere and you see the whole thing and you're like, wow, watching the big screen, but it's powerful to see it, but it was powerful on the day doing it as well.
Man. And you mentioned the big screen. Like, people should watch this, not on a phone, not on an iPad, not on a computer, not on a small screen, like the biggest screen you can possibly watch it on, because it's a different experience. And it's it's awesome on a big screen. Yeah.
Really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys had that bar scene, and I'm thinking, when I watch that director's cut, I'm like, we cannot lose 1 second of this. This is so amazing, and it is so powerful, and it is beautiful. And 1 second cannot be shaved off this. And of course, we shaved off more than half. Yeah. But it moves the story forward. Each one of these things, that's so important to have everything that we do. I think when I'm writing a story in novel form, everything has to be connected to a theme and move the story, move the characters forward. You can't stall it. You know what I mean? But you distill this down to the essential elements, and then the story continues on, and you get this coming home piece. And to me, that was the coming home piece was so important, just because we've all done it. We've all been overseas, doing those 6 months overseas, hitting those targets each and every night. And then it's time to turn over. The next platoon comes in, you do that high five. You have maybe a week, 2 weeks, possibly, to do some ops together. And then you get on a plane. And before they had a little decompression stop that they added, which just turned into a drinking fest, you would be home within 36 hours. You'd fly to Germany or Spain, and the crew would get some crew rest, or they'd switch out or whatever. And then you'd fly home. And if you're on the East Coast, you're there in 36 hours. So from kicking a door in Baghdad one night to then coming home and have your wife saying, "Would you change that diaper in there? The person's here to fix the sink or whatever." And you're like, yeah, okay, yeah. But you're still over there. You're still thinking about those guys. You still, in many cases, you want to be back in the fight, because that's your job and that's what you came in to do. And then you're not there, even though you just did your 6 months and you did it the best you could. There are other people there now, and you know that that's their job now, but you want to be there. And so we wanted to capture that. I wanted to make sure we captured that. And in the book, I put in a flashback to another coming home scene, is how I dealt with it in the book. And that's an actual coming home memory of mine that I just put into a fictional narrative. But the way that, David, that you captured that in the script, and then the way that Antoine filmed it with the shadows and the light, and Chris coming home and just door closing, and then all of it, I cannot imagine that scene being filmed any differently. It is so perfect and captures those elements.
We talk about these moments of discovery that happen on set. And I think, Jack, when we were working and collaborating on the script, we talked a lot about this false sense of equilibrium, right? You're trying to find equilibrium, but something's pulling you back. Right. And so that was very much in the dialogue and in the dynamic of the scene. And then I think it was Antoine and Chris discovered that moment with the hot plate.
Yeah, that right there.
And it was like, boom.
It's awesome. I love that. The second I saw it, I'm like, that's it. Like he's over there making his coffee, the toast, whatever he's doing. His mind is somewhere else. Yeah. And that is how it is. You can see it in the eyes. And that's how it is in real life. And then you walk over and grabs the thing and it's fantastic. Yeah. Then the call comes about Boozer. Bam, he's thrown into this again. Has that other tragedy. And I love that scene. We get introduced to we see the Land Cruiser and obviously an important part of the for me, because all these things are character development tools. So for me, every single piece of gear doesn't matter. It helps develop that character to include the vehicles. So he's a Land Cruiser guy, as I happen to be as well. But so then we have this Boozer scene where Reese gets hit again, and then his world is just fallen apart. And he's Warcom. We have that in there. We have the funerals in there. And I remember the funerals. There's a lot of discussion about the funerals and how to handle that, and how to show that, and a lot of iterations of the script. But man, I think all of that just plays so well into the things that we have all experienced coming home, the loss of our buddies, honoring our buddies, conflicting emotions, all these different things get captured in here. And how did the funeral scenes, how did those evolve over time, Dave, from the beginning to where we ended up?
Well, I think they became more and more of a montage as we worked on it. We knew we could tell the story visually. We didn't need a ton of dialogue in those scenes, but there is something interesting kind of in this through line of these scenes you just walked us through in this episode, from the bar to the coming home to those funerals. And it's this notion of brotherhood, long live the brotherhood. Boozer actually mentions, that in his toast, right? That's the toast. And then it carries across into, as Reese enters his house, haunted by the loss of that brotherhood, and then into the funerals, which is feeling and honoring that loss. But then what's also interesting is each of those scenes, you're introducing Constance Wu as Katie, Riley Keough as Lauren, and Arla Mertz as Lucy, and Jean Triplehorn as Hartley, right? And these are like the women of the terminal list. And they are just as strong as the men, just as strong in their convictions, right? Which is awesome to watch. Like that homecoming and that moment in the hallway, and where Riley takes Chris's face and she's crying. I mean, that's so goosebumps. Gosh, unreal. So good. And then in that moment with Jean pulling Reese aside after the funerals, and the kind of strength and control, but also there's a little maternal aspect to Jean that's fascinating, right? She's a little softer than the Hartley from the book, right? She's got that innate strength, but she's got this quality of connecting with them that is, puts you on your heels immediately, which is great. And so that run, it's so crucial to everything that we did in this. I absolutely, that's like part of it. We talk about the first 15 minutes and the last 15 minutes, but the middle 15 minutes is dominated by that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it was important. It was natural for me to write strong female characters in the novel. And now looking back on it, I think, I'm so glad I did. Because when I first walked into Simon & Schuster building, I was walking around, I'm like, there are a lot of females in this building. And I think that helped. But as I write it, I'm just doing that naturally because I have strong female role models in my life, from my mom, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, all three of them. My great-grandmother was born in the late 1800s. So she was through World War I, the Depression, World War II, like all of that. She saw the first car, plane, space shuttle launch, man on the moon, she saw that, all of that, but that Depression era for her and then my grandmother, and then how that influenced my mom and how strong all of them were, it was just very natural for me to write strong female characters, to include my wife that was just natural. It wasn't something I thought about consciously. It was just natural. So that is how it got translated onto the screen with these characters. And man, as I'm watching this, I'm like, I want more Riley Keough. I want,
incredible.
and I think that's great because that makes you, you're not like, oh, I'm done with this character. No, you want more of them, which I think is a really cool, fascinating element to film and television. But then we get to the fight scene. We got a fight scene coming up, and we have a decision to make early on in this process. And that is, hey, do we, we're grounding this thing in authenticity, but there's some other films out there that are doing some amazing things, essentially ballet and fight scenes. That's very popular. And we have to decide, hey, are we going that route? Or are we doing this the way that would happen if you were to walk outside and get tackled by somebody or just surprised by somebody, and you have this fight instinct to defend your life, your family's lives? And of course we went with the latter. So how did that fight scene develop? And Jared, you're there on set for that fight scene. And what is that like working with Chris on that fight scene to make it so primal and visceral? And it really stood out to people in the premiere. People came up to me afterward and said, that fight scene, I've never seen anything like it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's one of those things, like you said, where we had a choice to make, but I don't think it didn't take any of us very long to all be on the same page with it. Like you said, like anybody that's been in a street fight, any kind of, really fight in general understands it's not like movies where it's pretty and everything just flows. It's a dog fight. I mean, you're in it, and in this fight scene, and all of them really, but this one, he's in a fight for his life, and it ain't pretty. When you're going hand to hand like that, it's nasty. And so that's what we wanted to capture, and Chris loved the idea. He was all for it. Chris's stunt double, Chris Romrell, total stunt, just helped, develop these fights, build them out. He understood from day one our vision as well, which was huge. He understood like these fights, this action is going to be raw, gritty stuff. He knew it and he nailed it. Chris did a lot of his own stuff. Pratt did a lot of his own stuff, but Romero would jump in there and understood it, and Dave, of course, you were on board 100%. Like, hey, let's make it look like what it would look like, And then we had Jeff Dashnall for that part as well, who
incredible.
Dash is a legend in the business, and he understood it, he got it, he pushed for that. And so on the day, man, we had our beats, our moments that we were going to hit, but we just kind of let it go, let it happen. And man, what people can judge for themselves, but once again, I think we found kind of the sweet spot on that.
Oh yeah, and you get the Hitchcockian element there with the pistol, and once again Antoine capturing that lighting and everything else, and Chris in his eyes and all that. But you know what? We didn't talk about an important element of this first episode: Taylor Kitsch as Ben Edwards. Oh. And when Ben gets introduced at the airport and gets out of that vehicle, and they embrace. I mean, like they had this connection, like this real connection that we'd have in the teams. I mean, Chris, Taylor, and Jared as Boozer. This is a SEAL team. This is a Brotherhood. And Taylor crushes it. And the conversation that they have in the car, crushes it. And then the boat, he's on the boat. And I had to figure out a way in the book. Like, how does James Reese figure out that there's some sort of conspiracy going on here? What's the evidence other than the gut feeling? And I was like, going back to my roots, Caliber. And and I haven't seen that done before. But his buddy would not have taken his own life with a 9mm gun. No one would know that unless you're part of that Brotherhood. So we have the SIG 9mm 226, which has been on the side of every SEAL going into combat from 9/11 onward. So we have that pistol, we have that round, and that's that one thing. And I love when Chris is talking to the JAG as they're walking out and asks about that cause of death, SIG 9mm team pistol. No, but it was a team gift. And then that really starts everything. He knows at that point that there's something.
That was a thread. He started pulling that thread at that point.
That is it. I love Taylor on the boat, and that comes, of course, into play later at the very end. But Taylor crushes this role. I can't imagine anybody else.
Absolutely crushes it.
Yeah. So then we have this fight scene.
Jack, real quick. I mean, I thought one of the things that was really interesting and important to capture, because you have it on the page, is that Reese and Ben are opposites. They come from two very different worlds, but they have such a genuine connection. Yeah. And is that something common, in the teams? We haven't talked about that a lot.
Yeah, no, we haven't.
Yeah.
We haven't. So I wanted to show the difference to someone who is new to the world, kind of the difference between, let's say, the officer and enlisted ranks without talking about it. I wanted to visually show that. And I wanted to visually show it on the written page as well, through tattoos down sleeves, down the arms, the whole thing. And it's not, it's not every single officer and every single enlisted, but I needed to differentiate those two characters. Otherwise, with their backgrounds being very similar, there would be very few things that would differentiate those two at a base element type of a level. So I wanted to show that size difference in the book. And we had that also happened to have that with Ben and Chris at the same time. Show that visually through tattoos, a little bit different career path wise. So showing that really visually, so that you don't have like which one is who. These guys are pretty much the same. You can't have that in a book, and you can't have that in a series. So I wanted to capture that in a way that was cool to people who have worn the uniform, and then also for people who are new to it, whether it's reading the book or visually seeing that on the screen. And oh man, Ben Edwards played by Taylor Kitsch. Like, nobody better.
Just gets better. Yeah, just gets better.
Yeah, no, exactly. And man, we had that fight scene, and then bam, Reese is in that car. He's in that Land Cruiser, and he is flying home. And the world is starting to fall apart yet again for the third time in this opening episode. And I remember at the beginning we had a little bit of a different ending. We had in that first script we had a tiny bit different ending, and I think and then I remember when you sent me the this one that we have now. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, that's such a bummer. Like, I already got used to it in my head this other way, that we were going to end it. And I already had that in my mind. And I was like, oh man, this is such a bummer. How are we going to do that? And then I saw it. And Chris,
Antoine had a vision, dude.
Antoine had a vision, and then Chris had a vision with the music. And I remember he FaceTimed me in December of 20.
Ruth Barrett,
she does an amazing job. So cool to meet her. But Chris FaceTimes me out of the blue in December of 2020. So before you guys go to Australia for Thor, and he's like, quick, get on your computer. Are you near a computer? I'm like, yeah, I'm near a computer. And so I jumped on, and he's like, put this in YouTube. And I jumped on, and then he's like, look at this thing. And it's this crazy instrument that like takes up a room, the
Yabahar.
Yes. And he's like, what do you think of this? And I'm like, I think
catchphrase of Terminal is
I think it's awesome. Yeah. I'm like, I think that's perfect. And then so you have this like haunting music that I really haven't, heard in the way that it's done. And Chris is going home.
To be clear, we did not ultimately use the Yabahar.
Oh, it's the Yabahar. It sounds like it.
Yabahar, exactly.
Oh, I was under the impression that it was. Oh, it's the inspiration.
We used it as inspiration. That there's only one person in the world who plays that instrument, and it's very hard to get them. We just Ruth Barrett and her husband Ruskin, who's a music engineer. They worked together. They did, if anybody saw the awesome conspiracy thriller Bodyguard, BBC Bodyguard, they did the music for that. And we knew we had to have them for this. And it's
so the inspiration. So the whole time it was such an inspiration that I thought it was the actual thing for the last 2 years.
Nope. That's perfect.
But it captured that haunting, it's just so unique. Yep. So they really captured that feeling then behind what Chris wanted back then on that call. Incredible. Yeah. Incredible.
No, I think
that's how it ends, like with a sound that people haven't heard before, with this merging of Chris's anguish and the music coming together. It's a powerful way to end.
And we had to fight for it. Remember that, guys. We had to fight for that ending. And I appreciate our partners, because not a lot of shows will end the first episode with something that brutal. And I appreciate our partners at Amazon and MRC committing to this, because I think you said, Jack, early on, you said no holds barred.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
That's the way I write the novels, and I knew it had to be the same here. And exactly. you almost don't want to say it. Like, you're almost like surprised that Amazon came down on our side on all these things, because they're taking risks, and they're taking huge risks. They could be very safe. They could have been very safe with this, and it would have been fine. But it wouldn't have had heart. Wouldn't have had heart. So for them to commit to it the way they did, and, you know, even being a little nervous at a couple points, but to come down the way they did, I mean, I never really thank them enough. That's to trust us.
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
and the way the theater felt when we watched the premiere and we saw, you know, the last 3 minutes of the episode, you know, like it ends and then it's just like, ugh, like all the air went out of the room for a second, but in a good way. People were just taken aback. People were blown away. Yeah. We've seen it 100 times and I was blown away. Like, it still hit me all over again. I mean, I'm glad I had a little bit of time to the lights stayed down, you know, so nobody saw. I'm like, am I tearing up right now when I've seen this? However many times I've seen it. Powerful.
Man. And this team did it. This team made it happen.
Such a team effort. And I love this. And what I love is we've talked about all the members of the team. I mean, not all, but we're helping people see how much goes in to any great piece of work up on screen. Mm-hmm. It's remarkable, actually. And I love this, man. This is great.
No, and before we go, for those the music people out there, where do we get Little Bad Company and Simple Man? Where do those come from?
Jared Shaw.
Shaw.
Yeah. So Bad Company, which once again, Dave, I appreciate you being willing to listen and take it. Bad Company was, you know, there's guys that I did two platoons with. That was a big song for us. So those guys are going to hear that song and they're going to catch it. That was one that we'd listened to before we went out the door. And Jack, you know what that's like. You have your music you listen to before you roll, you know, and so we'd do our brief, all that. Guys would be jocking up, and that would be a song that we were listening to. And so Dave fought to get that one in there, and Antoine fought to get that one in there, you know, which was a big one, huge one, you know, because I know the people that will hear that and they'll be like, well done, Terminal List. Like, you guys did well on that one, you know. Nice. And then the other one, what was the other one? I'm blanking on.
It's the Shine Down. Shine Down cover.
Yeah.
Simple Man.
So little secret on that one. That is the song that I had set up to be played if I would have been killed overseas, and not to make it dark or sad or anything, but like that one is a heavy song. And to tie it in, you know, when we see Ben coming up to pick James up, we know what Ben is wrestling with. Yeah. Right. We know the secrets. Yeah. You don't find out till later. I should say Ben knows the secrets that Ben is struggling with, you know? And so that song is playing as he's coming up there. Now the audience won't know till the end of the season. It's all that song is to tie in. Basically, once it's all said and done, people are going to go back and they're going to be like, oh, okay, I see why that song was chosen. Cause that song's heavy. And if you listen to the lyrics, you go into the lyrics and listen to the exact words, people will really understand why that song was chosen.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thought went into that one. All of it.
Thought went into all of it.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, man. Gosh. Well, thank you guys for doing this. And obviously, thank you for the last couple of years. Thank you guys. This could not have been in better hands. And then thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm so glad we did it. I learned things that I didn't know about the Terminal List over the last couple of years. So, man, that is incredible.
This episode of the Danger Close podcast is brought to you by Cry Havoc. From New York Times #1 best-selling author, Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Reese thriller. Order now.
Watch a Cry Havoc teaser here, or watch another episode of the podcast here.